I think we are ready to start again. And as I said, now we will have a panel discussion. From some of the speakers we had this morning and some more interesting people. So we will start by just introduce ourselves so we all know who is there, and then we will discuss some of the main topics from this morning. So I'm Lotte, as I said in the opening, right? I am a technical person. I have a background from CERN, and I have the last years been working as a data engineer, data science, and data architect, actually. So I'm in this digital transformation in a manufacturing company. Yes?
My name is Greg Hansen. I'm CTO Vice President for Informatica across EMEA and Latin America, and I've been in this industry for 24 years.
It works. Okay, good. My name is David Huselius. I am Chief Data Officer at Swedbank, a big retail bank here in Sweden, for those of you not from here. I've been doing this job for about five and a half years, and it's actually my last week as CDO. From next week, I'll be moving into the business side of the bank, trying to make our lending process more data-driven, so that'll be exciting.
Helena Hanobrandt, you have just met me, Transformation and Operation at Scania Financial Services.
Good morning, Jo Couture. I'm currently the Chief Data Officer at BNP Paribas Fortis, big retail bank in Belgium. It's also my last week, or actually mentally, I've already left. Before I was most of my life an entrepreneur and a founder of a few companies, and I will now go back to doing that.
Thanks, all of you. I think this is really interesting because we all have very different backgrounds, right? And what I also find very interesting is we have two chief data officers, which is almost one of the first time I met, so two in the same time, and two that is actually also having the last week, so I think that is really interesting. So let me start there, actually. So David, what is from your experience some of the biggest mistakes that people and companies are making these years, right? And what do you think? And what do they do best is your experience? What is the best and what is the worst they do right now?
One lesson I take, and I take that into my next, into my future, is that as a data officer, you should never accept to become just a cost center. I started my journey with an ambitious business plan made by a big consulting company, which would return millions to our organization. Then we found out it's impossible to measure it. We didn't connect with the finance department sufficiently. And then we said, okay, let's just be a cost center, because like a CFO is a cost center also. Anyway, I'm now being provocative. But I don't think that's a sustainable position. So I take that as one of the key lessons. There are a lot of things that went well, but it's more interesting to learn from a mistake. That's my key mistake, I think.
Yeah. And you being in the same situation, more or less, is it the same that you would say is the biggest mistake, or what have you learned?
I think Joe's really onto something. It is extremely difficult, though, to showcase value, especially if you're working with the data foundational aspects, which is really, for me, when it comes to the data strategy, is really front and center. I mean, you want to tie your business strategies to your data strategies so that you're enabling those business strategies. But having said that, if you can achieve what you're talking about, I absolutely agree, because it is a really big challenge in the CDO role to explain to executive management what it is that you need to do and why and how that generates value. Extremely difficult. It's easy when you're talking about compliance, but there's more than that, right?
So also going to the talk of you, Helena. So just before we go there, have your experience been? It's just because I see this role to really be where the fire is, right? It's really, you put it there to be driving this. Have it been more like, not so technical as you expected, it's been more on the softer side, or what has you actually experienced in these last years? What was expected of you to actually drive?
Okay. But I think that's part of the, often actually lack of understanding that what do we actually do. And I think very big part of it that is often underestimated is just the change management aspect of things. That how do you get people to understand, how do you get the organization to mature to be able to use those capabilities and use them consistently. If you get stuck on the technical side of things, then I think you're really going to struggle.
Yeah, if you were to write a job description for a CDO now compared to 5 years ago, I think it would be very different. I think, as you said, one of the things I observe working with a number of CDOs is there's a lot of cultural politics as well within organizations, and your role is difficult because, we talked about this yesterday, but there's you haven't got an army of people working for you, so you need to mediate with the business in order to bring the people on the journey with you, and that's challenging. You've got to be a good politician as well as a good delivery agent.
And you really want the transformation, the transformation to becoming data driven. You want it to be business led, business driven, and I think that's where I think it's been really difficult because you can put as a CDO you can put the capabilities out there, but you're not responsible to make it actually happen out in the business. And actually, that is for me why I'm moving into the business now to try to do more of that, because I see that there's skills. The skills are missing in that space to make it happen as well. So that's just my personal journey in this.
So you're actually doing this shift because then you think, okay, there I can make a bigger impact because I now have the background that I have.
That's right.
But I think it's kind of hard as well because a lot of time people have done their way of doing it in a very successful way without the data. So explaining to them how they're going to do their job twice or thrice or even 10 times better than they have yesterday by using data, that's really hard. But once they have it there, they can never go back.
And I recognized your curve very much while you were explaining it. I was thinking the challenge is you have so many stakeholders who are in different places of that curve at the same time. So I really related to it.
Yeah, it is tricky. It is very tricky.
Yeah, exactly. That was also what I said right after your talk, right? I can really relate because you can see yourself in the different phases and you can see your stakeholders, your colleagues going through the same phases. And you say, so now it's up to you to keep up the good peers and try to... But I mean, how to do this in reality? I mean, you have someone who's in there. What would your best advice be, right?
I would say take one day at a time, really. And when you meet a person, just meet them where they're at. But also be a bit disciplinary to not fall out yourself, because that normally harms more than it do pleasure going forward. But I do think that I have a few people I call when I'm frustrated, and they help me. So really make sure that people have peers around them where they can have the level or the balance talk about where they are at their journey.
That's one of the challenges, I think. I think as a data leader, it's not easy to have peers.
No, it becomes
For
very
instance,
lonely.
we had 3 business leaders in different segments, and you really see that they take energy from each other because they are colleagues, they help each other.
Exactly.
I sometimes felt very lonely as a data leader because you're a bit, the CIO looks at you like, what are you doing? The business people are like, what are you doing? The compliance people like, what are you doing? So it's sometimes a lonely job, I think.
And the C-level goes, we need to do everything.
Yeah, exactly. I think you nailed this one because it also goes down to, I understand, it seems like you are talking a language that nobody else is really talking. So sometimes you also think, am I saying nonsense, right? And then when they suddenly get it, it's like you also say, I didn't say I could go to the moon tomorrow, right? I mean, I really find that, yeah. But you meet a lot of companies, right? You can see the difference. I mean, what is the biggest difference when you meet, into a company?
Yeah, so I mean, as a technologist, and hopefully you understood from what I was saying earlier on in the keynote, it's super important for us as an organization, even though we sell and partner with companies to get deployments, we're also kind of qualifying how mature that company is to adopt the technology. Because Our world is now a subscription world where you can turn us on and turn us off, right? So if people aren't getting value from what they're buying or what they're subscribing to, they turn us off, right? So when we go into that, we look at my perception is when we look at organizations, having a data strategy as we build it is one thing. But we already talked about thinking about things in a three-dimensional way, where the old world was people, process, and technology, and I think it's similar now, but you buy your technology landscape, you simplify, you need the culture piece, you need the strategy, but you need the sponsorship from above. So when we talk to organizations, we look for that sponsorship, because if they haven't got that sponsorship, it's difficult to move the organization along with you, because you will meet barriers as a CDO. I'm sure I've seen it many times where organizations, it makes total sense to move in this direction, but then there's a blocker. And there's a blocker because of politics in one department, or someone's personal ambition or someone's personal objectives that don't exactly mirror where the direction of travel is. And that's why the sponsorship is so important, to break that down. And we feel a lot more confident when that's in place to sort of engage with the company.
I absolutely agree on that sponsorship topic. I think for us, my experience was we were trying to position a data strategy for our organization for several years, and it wasn't until we were able to get really strong sponsorship, actually from one of our board members for the bank. That is when she asked in the board, why don't we have a data strategy? Then things started to happen. And I think we've had sponsorship on C-level, but I think that if I would do it again, the journey that I've been on, I think I would have demanded more time from the whole C-level, and actually demanded a bit of time from them just to educate them a bit as well, because I think that's been one of the struggles that you end up in these executive discussions, and you have like 15 minutes to say how you're doing and what you're doing and why and what kind of value that brings, and it's just not enough, because they're not at the level where they need to be necessarily. So they need to be educated along with the rest of the organization.
There's a bit of a paradox. I've been fortunate. Our bank said we need to put the CDO in the executive committee, so I've had the privilege of traveling with them in every meeting and being one of the peers. And now the choice is made. My successor will not be in that committee, and it's a deliberate choice, and he's very happy with it, because he says, at least I will not have to waste time being seen as another silo or a potential competitor or anything. I can now fully deploy as a CDO as a serving entity to all functions and all businesses, while you're then enjoying all the attention of the executive committee, you're also engaged in all the dynamics of an executive committee, which does not always lead to the greatest dedication to what you should really be doing. So there's no magic.
But I don't know if it's one or the other.
Yeah.
Because I think you have an educational period of the C-level that maybe be you, that really pushes through and carve out space. And then the next person come in and they have the carved out space and they can start to work with that.
Indeed.
And I think the biggest challenge of that is not that it's a lot of times the first person who pioneers in that gets after a while very tired and get headache and need to change the route. But I think that it's a necessary function, and that stage you need to become more pastor-like. You need to constantly talk to people about your passion and why, and get them inspired and all that. But then the next person in, or you have to take on a new role, and that's the more, let's work now, let's really systemize and get going with it. And the toughest part about this, I don't think, is to take either of the role. Both is equally important. I think it is that C-level also change positions so fast, and so does the management. So how do you transform in a transformation environment where all the leaders are constantly also changed? Mm-hmm. That, I think, is super tricky.
Yeah, but to some extent you can see, like the rest, they are also shifting around. So you are so the next one, if he met a chief data officer in the last company, he will then be ready for the next company. But of course, then you really need to go in the helicopter and see you do it better for the whole data society, right?
But the best is when it happens like you do, that you've been in a position, understand that perspective, and then you move into the business, because you will respect the next CDO completely different to what all the others have done.
For sure. No, but I think it is, or I hope, let's say, that it's a maturity journey for us as an industry. We were speaking about it a bit earlier, that it's, data professionals have been around for now maybe, 10 or 20 years, whatever you want to call it, but it's still pretty young, right? And I believe that the maturity curve will increase, and I believe that in another 10 or 20 years, you'll see much more data professionals being C-levels for different areas. I mean, I think you'll see much more of that. I hope so.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it's inevitable in that, because if you think about the way that the industry is moving around data, right, we're all shifting to cloud infrastructure and so on when we do that. And so there's an interesting paradox there, because in the old world, an organization used to own everything. But now we're moving forward. An organization won't own its application landscape. It won't own its data centers anymore. So there'll be more of a cohesive focus on the thing that they do own, which is the data. And that will be the differentiator in an increasingly digital world, is my belief. So I think the skills, the awareness, and the focus on what you guys do and what we provide is certainly going to increase, I think.
Yeah, and I think you said something interesting. They also see it a little bit like a threat, right? Because it's something they could be the master about, right? You are in a new silo when you're sitting there, taking a little bit of what they can do out of their hands, right? So maybe it's also, in a normal team building, there's also like this phase where everybody needs to find their spot. Maybe it's like a team building in the industry. So we need to figure out, where does it fit in, right? Is it a new one, or do they take it under them? But of course, it's a little bit tough it is tough when you create a team, right, on the people there.
So another paradox is, the more you educate them and the more sexy and attractive you make the whole thing, the more people want it. But wanting it is often, I want it for me. So people are very willing to centralize or make a service center out of stuff that they really don't care about. But now you make this data science and this data, you make it very attractive. It becomes also part of a territorial drift, which is a sign of success, I would say, to some point. But
yeah, and I think it was also mentioned yesterday that the higher you get in the hierarchy, the harder it also is to admit, now there's something I need to learn, right? So it's also a little bit harder to learn these people, maybe. I don't know. Yeah. So if we go then on to the skills, what is the important skills you need to ensure you have for this journey to happen? What do you think, Elena?
I mean, for me, number one is always inclusive leadership and diversity. That's absolutely the most important, because now that we move into ecosystem, we do cross-functional, but also cross-corporations. So the organization becomes really porous, and the employee used to find safety and security in their group, and all of a sudden they need to be energized in a lot of groups. And if you're not inclusive in those other groups, you're not going to feel like you're home and belonging and energized and know the people. So I think diversity and inclusion is absolutely number one.
I think you gave a good overview in your opening speech, and you showed how diverse it needs to be in terms of roles. I think that was spot on.
Thank you.
Yeah, investment in people, right? That's to support everything everyone said. But for me as well, I think the companies, as they reach that maturity, they realize that, as Mariana said earlier on, it's not a technology project, it's a people project as well, it's a cultural shift. And those organizations that I see have done it well. If they've created things like data skills academies and so on, really trying to invest in making sure the end user, where the data should be democratized to, has the ability to leverage it. And that's forgotten about in many companies. They kind of, let's build it and they will come. but it doesn't. We've probably already learned the lessons from things like data lakes 3 years ago. That you can build it, but they won't come. You've got to build the skills and the appreciation, as well as the sponsorship and the strategy, the direction travel. But you've got to look after the people in the field to make sure they can use it and leverage it.
To become equally obsessed as we are with the customer these days,
Well,
with the user.
Yeah, well, I see a partner or a supplier of yours, an employee of yours, is a customer of yours. Yeah, so if you're in the business of developing data products, they are your customer. And I mentioned it briefly earlier on. My view is as well is the way we should think about data and data pipelines is exactly the same way that we should think about a high quality manufacturing process. So I was working with an aerospace company the other day, and when you talk to them, they didn't quite understand data quality and the importance of it. And I said, well, let me put it like this. When you build your aerospace engines, you go through a quality process of manufacturing because you want to make sure that the aircraft engine doesn't fail and the aircraft falls out of the sky, right? But we're sat there making decisions on data where we don't know the quality of the data. We don't really know. And if you're a member of the UK and you've seen our economy go up and down in the last few days, maybe that's a data challenge in its own right. But the same pipeline of data quality process we should implement in order to make sure we're making the right decisions.
I really agree that it's important to think about all the employees as a customer. I think one thing that we've been quite successful with is when building the information catalog for the bank is that we've been really focused on that, the user experience. Difficult, right? So we're not successful all over the place, but I think what we've done right is that we've tried to really focus on the users and see them as customers. We're putting a lot of effort into our UX and kind of employee journey through the tools. We use Adobe Analytics to see, who are using the tool. Where is it being actually used, and what does the adoption rate look like? So I think that's key.
Greg, I think you said something important. You use analogies, and to your question, what worked? For me, that worked quite well in the messaging, using analogies, and you need to make one that helps. In a bank, I said, if we would be treating our money like we're treating our data, we would be printing money all over the place. We would not know where it is. We would not know who takes it out, who brings it in. We don't know what the currencies are. Can you imagine that? And then people look at you like, no. Well, if we agree that data is a valuable asset like money, then we should treat it as such. Because sometimes I think for the foundational stuff like governance and cataloging, at some point you just need to say it like that, because you cannot keep selling that, because nobody's interested in cataloging per se. Honestly, nobody's interested in accounting per se. So why do we do accounting? Well, because it's a valuable asset. Should do it for data as well.
But I also think this is, and we do it all the time at Scania as well, but I think leaders react too slow to the actual change. So once they want to do it, it needs to be done now, and it's like a crisis, and then it's not very energizing for the people either, and then you just focus on the short term, and it's like, we need to do it now, and then people are really, really tired, exhausted, annoyed, and all of that.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because one of my other observations is people think about it with a project mentality. So they start off and say, right, we need this, we need this academy, we need to... But then they don't think about the longer term, right? The marathon versus the sprint, as we talked about earlier on, because you've got to operationalize it. That process, as we talked about, it's not one-off. It doesn't start now and finish in a year. It starts now and it continues forever. So then how do you keep it going over time? Maybe that's a question back to you guys about once you built your data strategy and it leaps off the page and it gets into operation, how do you keep the emphasis and the engagement and prove that it's working?
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard.
I decided, and that worked, I think, to start treating it like any other boring process in the company. It's provocative, because we tend to think we need to make it attractive. I think the products need to be attractive, but at some point, the operationalization, the governance, etc., you need to anchor it like you do other stuff, like you do financial management or risk management or people management. Not try to put data management something that's supposed to be fun and needs to be motivated all the time. It's just needs to get done like the rest of it.
Yeah, but that also leads to the question then how do you then define, because the rest is also have KPIs and stuff, then how do you define the value of all of this, right?
Do we have KPIs to define the value of accounting? I've never seen them.
No, you're actually absolutely right. And I think that one of our first biggest project we ran straight into bad data or dirty data, not correct data, not organized data. And the MD started to sit like this is your fault, go and fix it, you know, the common. And we were like, it's impossible. And if we take it by law, they're actually obliged by law to have their data in the correct form. And it's actually you who's responsible for that not spreading or being organized and being able to be cleaned. And I think today I'm grateful. When I was in the middle of it, I was stressed, annoyed, and did not know, you know, I became also reactive. But we started the dialogue in the company that we would never have had otherwise. So sometimes emotional responses are really good to drive change.
Yeah. So now there's two of you, and what would, if you have one advice? I hope you're up for it. But if you have one advice to the next one, what would that be? The one who's taking your chair. You have an idea? Otherwise, it's okay. If you will go back.
I think for me, it's really. We've spoken a bit about this, right? It's really about the change management journey to really focus on, okay, how do we change the organization to think differently and put really emphasis on that. I think that would be the key advice. That we've done that to some extent, but I think we in retrospect, I think we should have done much more.
And maybe this is a leading question, but would it be change management upward or downward or all over the way?
Yeah, really, all of it, right? I mean, like I said earlier, you need to educate executive levels so that they understand what we're doing and why and how. But you definitely also need it in the broader parts of the organization, the people, the doers. Because part of that change management is going to be to actually change the workforce a bit, and yeah.
I gave my successor, which I am respect a lot, 3 short pieces of advice. 1, be selective with meetings and skip meetings where you don't need to be. 2nd, get out more, go to conferences like this and don't get stuck in your ivory tower of a big company. And 3rd, test the intention of your stakeholders very early in the process. If at some point people don't want to change the credit process, figure out why, try to change that. But at the end of the day, if they don't want, don't activate your data scientists because you will burn them up, you will lose them, and it's not worth it. Focus on people who have an intention to change and who want to get there and want to give you success.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Because it's a talent war, so we need to be very careful with our tech people as well, equally much.
Absolutely.
If I comment, I mean, you guys commenting on your side. From my side, from a technology point of view, maybe what needs to change is there's a lot of talk about things like data mesh and fabric and so on and so on and so on. But they're kind of labels to my knowledge. But when it comes down to it, I think to really take advantage of the data, you need to simplify. And most large organizations in this audience, there's too much complexity there. And complexity is really challenges your ability to become agile and leverage the data moving forward. So you need to simplify. And that means standardization. So when you're looking at implementing a fabric, a mesh, or whatever you want to do, think about making smart decisions, reduce the amount of vendors you're working with, because every integration point is more complexity. More complexity is lower agility. Right? And in the modern digital world, that is the enemy of success in my mind. So simplify, standardize on technologies, platform-based approaches.
But that actually leads to one of the other questions from the audience. Can you be a bit more clear? So where actually to start? I mean, what should the first step? You say simplify, but simplify what? I mean, there's so much.
Yeah, so on my side of the world, where we think about, you standardize on your technologies and you think about moving forward, the first challenge you've got to ask yourself is, do I know where all my data assets are? Do I understand the data? So the first challenge really is that discovery exercise. And you will find that if you ask a CDO, do you know where all your customer data resides? If they tell you they do, then they're lying.
Indeed.
is my experience, right? So that discovery exercise is so powerful. And I think, and you can comment, I think it helps educate the CDO as well and helps inform the data strategy on what is the art of the possible. Because once you understand what assets you have, you're then making informed decisions. And then I would say, don't try and boil the ocean, because it's tempting to say, I'm going to have a data strategy and I'm going to do everything from day one. But I think the most successful ones are the ones that deliver value in shorter sprints. So they've got a mind's eye on what the immediate value is that they can demonstrate. And then they use that as almost like an advertisement to then take it to the next and the next and the next. And they build reusability so that they do a project once. And then if you've got the right framework for technology, 80% of that is applicable to the next one and the next one and the next one. And you get increasing amounts of value at a shorter pace of innovation.
Thanks a lot. And thanks to all of you. We are now in the last minute before we go offline again. But I really find it really fascinating. And what I really find fascinating, and that's why I agree one should go to these events really a lot, is you meet people from completely different industries facing exact same problems, right? While you go around maybe in your company feeling sometimes a bit alone, you have maybe a few, and then you go here and you feel like, how can there be so many seeing the exact same things, right? This is a little bit of a puzzle for me, because it's so, I mean, it's a bank and it's a pump and it's trucks, right? It's very different, right? I find that fascinating, yeah.
People are people.
People are people. I guess that's what it is. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.